Good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. The tropics remain very busy as we now have a new Hurricane Nigel over the central Atlantic and another system that may follow it, and then something that looks like it's going to develop and be in our hair here by the end of this week into the weekend in the southeast. Very unsettled weather for the entire eastern part of the country, and some severe weather moving into the plains here in the next few days. So I'm going to share my screen and get to all of that, but we are likely to see some form of a storm coming up the southeast coast here Friday into Saturday, and a possibility it becomes a subtropical or even tropical storm. And that's going to bring yet more rain to places that have gotten way too much of it recently, like Charleston, South Carolina. I saw you guys got flooded again downtown yesterday. More rain on the way for you here towards the end of this week into the beginning of the weekend. The Northeast dealing with kind of a nor'easter type storm here as we get into tonight and tomorrow. Unfortunately, this one's going to head your way as well by the weekend. So many of us that have plans this weekend need to be watching very carefully the evolution of this potential storm system. And the rest of the tropics stay busy as well. This area has now got a 30% chance of becoming something subtropical, maybe even tropical by the time we get towards Friday and Saturday. So right now it hasn't formed, but as we get towards the end of the week, it looks like it will. We do have Hurricane Nigel, which is going to rapidly intensify and become our next major hurricane over the central Atlantic, but fortunately that is not a threat to land. We have another wave that has a high chance of becoming a depression towards the end of the week or weekend. And I do believe this one and this one are going to do battle to see who gets the name Ophelia first. The one that doesn't get it could take the name Philippe. So incredible that even in El Nino, we're talking about major hurricanes over areas where we thought the wind shear would be maybe a little bit too strong to see stronger storms. But this one has the potential to be another hurricane by the time it gets close to where Nigel and Lee were here in the central Atlantic. So we're going to talk about all of that here in just a second. Here is a look at our satellite imagery. And really, Lee is pretty much off the plate at this point, or off the table and off our plate at this point. You can see that circulation over the Labrador Sea heading very quickly east towards the British Isles. We do have a front here over the east coast that has brought the heavy rain to the Carolinas yesterday. And unfortunately, that heavy rain is heading up into New England, where we're going to have potential flash flooding over the next 24 to 36 hours, especially interior parts of New England. Another front's going to move into the plains here today, and that is going to set up shop here over the northern Gulf and over the East Coast as we get to the end of the week, and more low pressure expected here over these warmer waters. So we very well could see low pressure here somewhere off the Florida coast, off the Georgia coast, heading northward towards the Carolinas by Saturday. We do have large Hurricane Nigel, which is up to 80 miles per hour. Fortunately, that is going to turn to the right of Bermuda, which is over here, and not a threat to land. We call these fish storms, of course. The rest of the Gulf and the Caribbean are quiet for the time being. But because we are seeing more and more fronts coming down now into the Gulf of Mexico, which we did not see during the heart of summer, we're not ready to just tuck in the Gulf Coast yet, put it to bed, give it the milk and cookies. I think we do need to watch the Gulf here as we get into the month of October. So I don't think we're fully finished yet. Based on what I'm seeing kind of in the longer range. So that is an overall view of what we're looking at. The water vapor confirms this, that really the only player on the map here is Hurricane Nigel, but we do have a lot of rain, a lot of moisture coming up the East Coast here into New England. We've got another wave set to move off of Africa here in a couple of days, and that could develop into our next system near the Cabo Verde Islands, the Cape Verdes, towards Friday into Saturday. And very dry air in place over the southeast. So it should be a pretty nice stretch of weather for the next few days until we get towards the end of this week. Here's a look at the central Atlantic, and you can see Hurricane Nigel beginning to take shape and developing pretty quickly here. A decent chance this will rapidly intensify and become a major hurricane by tomorrow morning. So we are going to certainly track that for you guys here. And here's a closer look, and you can see low wind shear and developing thunderstorm activity. We have what are called vertical hot towers. These are popping up around the center, and the core starting to get its act together. So I think Nigel is likely going to a major hurricane in the next 24 hours. How strong it gets is still a little bit uncertain, but I think category 3 to 4 is probably our ceiling at this point. I don't think we're talking category 5 like we saw with Lee in this part of the world. The good news is that it's quickly gaining latitude. We're already up to 27 north. Bermuda, I believe, is at 31 north. So this storm is Fortunately, going to recurve well to the east of Bermuda, and I know it didn't show that about 4 or 5 days ago, but it is now. So just kind of some signs that our forecasts do change quite a bit sometimes with these developing storms. The National Hurricane Center has winds of 80 miles per hour and predicted to get to Category 3 in 36 hours. That would be 120 miles per hour. There's a chance it could be a little bit too low on this forecast, but it is going to recurve and accelerate over the north central Atlantic and likely become post-tropical by the time we get to the end of this week. So it's going to eat up a lot of warm water and scare the fishes here, but not really going to do any other damage aside from that, fortunately. Great behavior on the models here. They all show this curve in the same place. They do spread out a little bit more as the system becomes post-tropical towards the end of this week. And we do need to keep an eye on things in Scotland and Ireland for potential impacts coming next weekend out of the remains of this system. And you can see here on the ensembles, everything is shifted right with time. There's a chance it could shift just a little bit more, but I think we're starting to come into better agreement at this point. And all of these predicting a powerful storm here in the next 2 or 3 days before we see the storm weakening. The SHIPS model shows a pretty decent chance that this will rapidly intensify in the next 24 hours by at least 25 knots, which is about 30 miles per hour. So we're at 80, so it's got a decent chance it gets to 110, and still a pretty good chance it gets to 120 or even 130 here by the time we get up to potentially seeing that wind strength as high as 140 miles per hour. The chance is still 28%. So very much a pretty good chance, I would say, here this gets up to Category 4 strength. I mean, 25% on a SHIPS model is 6 times the average. And the way things have played out here in the last month over the Central Atlantic, that would not shock me one bit. Don't think it's going to Category 5, though. You can see it's got a 0% chance of strengthening up to 150, 160 miles per hour. Wind shear is going to be pretty low for the next couple days. Relative humidity is high, but the ocean heat content eventually does run out here as we're starting to see some cooler water after 24 hours. So the chance that it gets all the way up to Cat 5 right now, pretty slim. But I think Category 3 is a good bet. Category 4 is a possibility. None of the models is going to show that because they just do not have the skill level and show that kind of strengthening. But I mean, you can see the tropical models here, the 2 HAFSs, showing the storm very slowly strengthening some more, and it's clearly showing that sign on the satellite that it will be strengthening pretty quickly. Now, things are kind of messy in the eastern Atlantic. We definitely need to see Nigel get out of the way before we see any more development, but the models do show eventually this wave coming off of Africa has a chance of developing. It may take about 6 days for that to happen before we get our next storm, and it's very possible that the southeast coast sees something before this becomes a named storm. So I'm not ready to call this one Ophelia or future Ophelia just yet, because that one could certainly scoop that name up, even if it's subtropical. But I do think we see at least Ophelia, if not Philippe, coming off the coast here by the time we get to the weekend. The European control model shows us here the strengthening here of Hurricane Nigel, the coastal low coming up through New England here over the next 2 days. And then once we get those two systems out of the way, we see lowering pressures off the southeast coast and lowering pressures here over the main development region. This is Friday at about 8 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to have 2 circulation centers here, both of which are poised to become a tropical system. This one would be more subtropical, but certainly it's going to have rainfall and wind with it. It just may not have the core that a tropical system would have. It would have kind of a colder core versus the warmer core. But you can see we do have 2 circulation centers here this weekend that we'll be tracking as Nigel heads away into the high latitudes and loses tropical characteristics. So we're seeing this on the European control, and very likely that this system here is also going to be a fish storm. This is next Wednesday, and you can see the turn away to the north and east. Bermuda's over here. So as long as these systems continue to recurve, that actually gives us more favorable weather for East Coast storms here right on into next week. Whether or not they become tropical doesn't seem to matter. I just think the wet pattern continues here over the Maritimes of Canada, over New England, and possibly over the southeast and mid-Atlantic coastlines. But here you can see this system here. I don't know if it's Philippe or Ophelia, but it is going to be around here for quite some time, right up through October 2nd and 3rd, finding a crease here between a ridge that will build in to the eastern U.S. and a subtropical ridge off of Spain and Portugal here. The operational GFS model is very much in agreement with the European control. You see our storm is at its strongest here tomorrow afternoon and evening, then making a quick turn and pulling away and actually merging with this maritime low pressure system here by Thursday night and Friday. We do see lowering pressures on the GFS here by Friday afternoon and evening east of Jacksonville, south of Myrtle. So this system very well could get going before the next one here coming off of Africa. So we very well could see subtropical storm Ophelia in here. This one could take a little bit longer to become Philippe. If it even does so, the GFS says at this point it's not even going to develop anymore. It showed that it would here a couple days ago. GFS also on this run doesn't show it, but if you go back a little bit here, it does show some lowering pressure here over the Gulf of Mexico. So we got to keep an eye on that area as well, the southern Gulf here. I mean, again, it's 2 weeks away, but as fronts come down here into the southern Gulf, we definitely need to keep an eye on the tail of them, because any kind of lowering of wind shear shows more favorable conditions for development. So while the 0Z GFS did not develop this system, the 18Z did, and it could have something east of the islands. It also shows something could get going here in the southern Gulf, but that would not be until the beginning of October. So we've got some time to watch both of these potential areas. Looking at the East Coast here, our front moving away. Fortunately, we've got a pretty good stretch of weather, except in Central and South Florida, where our front hangs on a little bit longer. It's going to be a wet week here across the Florida Peninsula, but you can see we have this low pressure beginning to take shape here Friday afternoon east of Jacksonville, and the pressures are pretty high at this point. I know the GFS a few days ago tried to ramp this up very quickly, but it doesn't look like that'll be the case. But look at Saturday morning. Those of you that have plans to go to the beaches here are not going to be super happy with this forecast if this holds. We've got significant amounts of rain and probably some rougher waves and rougher winds coming to at least the Outer Banks area, if not the rest of the Carolina coastline. But this is Saturday morning at 8 in the morning, and then here's Saturday afternoon, and it looks like a total washout here Friday night and Saturday over the eastern Carolinas, and then across eastern Virginia and central Virginia the rest of Saturday before our low pressure center heads northward. We're still going to have moisture left over on Sunday, but Saturday looks to be the worst of the 2 days. And then we see all that moisture heading northward here into the northeast. So it's going to be pretty wet over the next couple of weeks, unfortunately, here. We get some dry weather. We get a couple of really nice days in here this week, but we get wet once again by Friday and Saturday. European shows kind of the same thing here. It's a little slower to develop low pressure, but it does show dropping pressures here east of Florida. It shows the coastal boundary coming west. And by Saturday morning, it shows some pretty wet weather here over eastern Carolina, North Carolina and southeastern Virginia. So college football games on Saturday look pretty nasty here across the eastern part of this region here. This is Saturday morning, here Saturday evening, and we still have some low pressure out in here to track at this point. I don't know why the Europeans not going out any further on the weather bell, but trust me, it shows wet weather. And then the Canadian model also agrees. Kind of more in line with the GFS, a little farther east with our low pressure system here Friday afternoon, but does have something with dropping pressures here. It looks like a subtropical storm, and probably Ophelia if the Canadian's right. And by Friday night, we're looking at high school football games likely getting washed out here in eastern North Carolina, maybe back to Raleigh, even all the way back to Greensboro and Columbia and Charleston, South Carolina. And the Canadians farther up the coast with landfall, but it shows the same look, and that's heavy rain and gusty winds by Saturday morning over the entire mid-Atlantic region, then heading up into the northeast by Saturday night and Sunday. The Canadian I like better because I've got something I've got to do outdoors Sunday afternoon, but the other models do not show that. So until we get a little more certainty on what the models are going to do with this system, it's going to be quickly evolving, quickly moving, but bringing a lot of rain with it here. So that's what we're looking at here. I'm going to zoom out and show you guys some winds from the Canadian, and you can see with our coastal low coming up, some rough winds offshore here tonight into tomorrow, but nothing like what we saw with Lee. And then quiet weather for a couple days. We have the fetch of onshore winds by Thursday and Friday, and you can see some pretty rough surf is predicted here by the Canadian model, with wind gusts on the coast starting to get over 30 miles per hour by Friday morning, and then as high as 40 to 50 miles per hour here by Friday night as low pressure continues to form. In the Outer Banks, we could have some really rough weather to deal with. Even Emerald Isle, Morehead City, 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts are possible, whether or not this thing gets a name. And those wind gusts continue up towards the Chesapeake Bay on Saturday, and then up into coastal New England and Long Island here Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. A lot of this is due to higher pressure to the north, lowering pressure to the south. You get that gradient that sets up Whether or not we get a named storm, we get the wind with it. So do expect some rough surf here, maybe some coastal erosion and flooding here over the weekend, anywhere from South Carolina all the way up into New England here, with the worst of it coming on Saturday, it looks like. So we're tracking that wind. You can see zoomed in here on the Canadian. Quiet weather for a few days, then winds start picking up Thursday in South Carolina and Georgia, and then Thursday night and Friday morning over the remainder of the Carolina coastline, gusts over 30 to maybe over 50 miles per hour by Friday night, and then heading up into the Tidewater region of Virginia to the peninsula, to the middle neck and the northern neck. We all could see wind gusts over 40 miles per hour, even to the mouth of the Potomac and eastern parts of Maryland. We could see some rough wind here during the morning on Saturday before this low heads away to the north. So it's going to be windy out there. We're also going to see quite a bit of rain. Excuse me. Here's a look at our first storm, bringing some very heavy rain up into New England later today through tonight and early tomorrow. We could see amounts over 2 inches. And then we get a bit of a break. And then here comes our next system gathering moisture here over central Florida and then off the East Coast. And that's going to bring heavy rain into the eastern Carolinas Friday afternoon, Friday night, and especially early in the day on Saturday, where some places do have a potential of seeing anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain in here. So doesn't need a name to be nasty, that's for sure. A look at the European high resolution, and you all can see this is our storm moving away now. And as we get here towards Friday and into Friday night and Saturday, we see amounts that are up over 4 inches in Virginia Beach, over 4 to 5 inches around Wildwood and Cape May, 1 to 2 inches on Long Island, coastal New England, another couple of inches. So I think by the time we get to Sunday night, we're going to be pretty much done with rain here. Just sick of it, because even though Lee didn't really bring the rain all the way back, we've got one system coming up now and another one here over the weekend. It's just going to get old very quickly here. So this is the European model, the Canadian's farther west, but you can see those higher rainfall totals are possible here, even along the I-95 corridor from Boston all the way down to Richmond and even down to Rocky Mount. Excuse me. So yeah, we definitely have our hands tied here with all the rain. A look at the European here in New England here over the next 48 hours, and we see amounts that could get over 4 inches in parts of northern New Hampshire, over 2 to 3 inches across central Mass, eastern Connecticut, eastern Long Island, western Maine, and even into southern parts of Quebec, eastern Vermont. So a lot of rain coming with this unnamed coastal storm that's coming through. It's out of here in time for the second part of the week, and we get a 3-day break before we have more coming up here. This is a look at the European for this weekend, and you can see more significant rain coming up. Parts of Jersey do have the potential to see over 6 inches of rain here across Atlantic County, and New York City could see a couple of inches as well. Again, this forecast will probably change, but the idea that this rain is coming certainly is with us, whether or not we get a named system. Now, we also have severe weather we need to monitor here across the plains over the next couple of days. You can see our jet stream is starting to drop down and get more active. We're going to see one lead disturbance moving across the southern plains here over the next 2 to 3 days. So Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas are going to see some pretty busy weather, and I'll go show you some details in a minute. But behind that, a big upper low moving into the west, a pretty strong trough that is going to bring active weather into the southwest and eventually onto the plains here by Friday and Saturday. So storm chasers that have been in hibernation for a couple of months are probably going to come out of hibernation by the weekend, I would think, as we have a pretty intense trough that's going to be moving and lifting up through the northern plains and the Great Lakes region here. And behind that, we're going to see more active weather continuing as we start the fall severe weather season. Here's a look at our supercell composite, and you can see we'll start to see some rougher weather here over the Red River Valley into western and central Oklahoma later tomorrow, spreading up into Kansas as well. We do have a slight risk there. I'm going to show you guys in a little bit. That's wave number 1. Wave number 2 gets more active here on Friday and into Friday night and Saturday. You can see eastern Kansas, eastern Nebraska, western Iowa, southern and eastern parts of South Dakota are all going to get some busier weather here, starting on Friday and Friday afternoon, and then continuing into Saturday a little bit farther to the east. I don't think we're going to see that kind of severe weather crossing the Mississippi River, but certainly in the Central Plains, we're going to have some active weather. We have a marginal risk later today across the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles up into southwestern parts of Kansas. As we get to tomorrow, though, that area becomes larger and moves farther to the east, and we do have a slight risk out for a lot of Oklahoma and North Texas, even a marginal risk into southern parts of Kansas. And as we get on into Wednesday, still a marginal risk across this area. We don't yet have an outlooked area for Thursday or Friday, but I do think we're going to trend in that direction here as we get later into this week. You can see here our severe weather chances, just a marginal risk, mainly for severe wind later today from Clovis through Amarillo up to Woodward and towards Dodge City. But tomorrow is going to be the day where we have more widespread severe weather. Wichita Falls, Lawton, Norman, right up I-44 all the way to Tulsa, all the way back I-35 towards Enid and just east of Woodward here. And we are going to see severe wind across this region, especially in the afternoon, early evening, but even bigger chance early in the evening for maybe some gorilla hail, significant hail just north and west of Wichita Falls, just east of Childress, right up into the western half of Oklahoma. So storm chasers here coming from Norman are going to be getting busy here tomorrow afternoon, but I think maybe a bigger outbreak here as we get to Friday and Saturday. Well, I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. Another video coming tomorrow as we take a closer look at the tropics and the severe weather outbreak. And as a meteorologist, I'm going to do my best to help you all be prepared. I'm going to be pretty busy the next few days, but I'll give you guys some community updates as I can. But I thank you so much for your time today. If you're new and you have watched a few videos and you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing. I do have a membership channel. If you feel led to want to contribute 33 cents a day, you can do that. I will be interacting with those folks on a priority basis, giving them kind of more attention because I know a lot of you will be commenting and I'm not going to have a chance to really comment on everybody's post. I'm just a little too busy for that, to be honest with you guys, but I really do appreciate your time. I thank you, and I give all the glory to God who gives me this gift to share with you all the weather, to share with you all preparations for stormy weather, and to share the good news that Jesus is coming again, because I am a Christian man, and that's what brings me joy. The weather is fun to track, don't get me wrong, but I can't do any of that without God. He has created me, he's created you, and David declares in Psalm 19 that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of the heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. And here David just says that God shows himself. He has created all of us, the heavens, the earth, the animals of the sea, the animals of the air, human beings. God put us here on earth, and he is showing us all his wonderful creations. I hope you take some time this week just to get outside and just take in what God has created for us. If you are not a believer, you're still gonna acknowledge that nature is beautiful, right? I really hope you do anyway. But I just want you all to see that I personally believe God created that for our enjoyment, for us to take care of things. And then one day when we get to our end of times here on the earth, that we are able to accept that God has sent his son Jesus so that we can live with him in heaven for the rest of eternity. And it's not just that God created the earth and the heavens, but his holy word. There's no speech or language where your voice is not heard. You mean a lot to God. And I know when I first found God and when I first accepted Jesus, I was in a spot where I just didn't see God's glory. I was, not that I didn't appreciate what was there, but I just struggled and struggled and struggled. And I think a lot of you might actually kind of relate to that. But I knew that there had to be something greater for me in my life. And fortunately, a door opened up where I was able to start to study the word, to study the holy word of the Lord, and to accept Jesus Christ as my savior. And from then on, everything has changed. And I've been commissioned to share that good news with you. I believe anybody who's been given a magnificent gift needs to share that with other people. It's going to be tough to just hold on to it yourself without sharing with others. So I just wanted to share that good news with you today. I hope you all believe that. If you don't, I'm not going to judge you. I mean, that's really not my call. I accept people of all walks of life, but I just want to share what's important to me and why I do what I do. That's where I am here on YouTube. Giving weather forecasts is great, but getting there is, going through the journeys that we have on life is even more important to me. So I'm happy to pray for you if you're struggling in your faith, or if you are a person of faith that just needs some extra encouragement. I would love to pray for you and over you. So please don't feel discouraged. Just know that a lot of us are out here. We're happy to pray for you. And I would appreciate it if you could pray for me as well. I think we all need that encouragement from each other as brothers and sisters here, created by God. I hope you all have a wonderful day. We'll chat again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. See you then.